Talk time, march. Detail, halt. Right, face. Post the colors. Present arms.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Port, arms. Left, face. Forward, march.
Please be seated. All right. It looks like everybody's making some new friends this morning, so thank you. Welcome and good morning. Welcome to Northwest State Community College. My name is Mike Jacobs. I'm the Career and Activities Coordinator here at the school, and I just want to thank you for joining us on this very special day. My father and grandfather were Navy veterans, and my son is currently stationed in Vilseck, Germany, serving in the United States Army. And I'm honored to be here before all of our veterans and our guests, and we're humbled by your service. Thank you. So why do we celebrate Veterans Day? Veterans Day is a day set aside to thank and honor all who have served, living or deceased, but particularly the living veterans among us here today. Veterans fought for our freedoms and risked their lives whether or not we realized it or appreciated it. Without the service of veterans, we would not have the freedoms that we have today. I'd like to introduce the 8th president of Northwest State Community College, Todd Hernandez. He's a native of Northwest Ohio and a 1989 graduate of Napoleon High School. He holds a doctorate of information technology from Walden University, and again is currently serving as our 8th president. He joined the Northwest State team in 2010 and has served as training coordinator, chief information officer, vice president for innovation, and executive vice president. Lieutenant Hernandez served as a nuclear-trained surface warfare officer in the United States Navy for 8 years, from 1991 to 99. After completing Officer Candidate School and the Nuclear Power Training Program, Todd was assigned to the USS South Carolina out of Norfolk. Dr. Hernandez has a strong commitment to helping people and strengthening the community and feels very grateful to be here at Northwest State Community College. Please help me welcome Todd Hernandez.
Welcome to Northwest State. I hope you enjoy the presentation today. And for those of you that haven't heard, I know this is about veterans, but I want to plug the college just for 1 second. Northwest State was recently named or ranked the #1 community college in the state of Ohio. Cool. At this time, I'd like the veterans to stand so that we can acknowledge all of the veterans and with our thanks. As you just heard from Mike, I am a veteran myself, and each one of us has very personal reasons for why we decided to go into the military. And for me, it was kind of threefold. First is I wanted to give back service. Second, back when I joined the Navy, their slogan was "Join the Navy, see the world," and they lived up to their promise. I had a chance to travel the entire world. At the time, I'd never seen the ocean. I didn't realize that I get seasick. I learned that on my first deployment. That was pretty interesting. And the third reason, so I was in an electrical engineering program, got my undergrad degree, and the third reason was the opportunity in nuclear power, really just to broaden my understanding of systems engineering and how things work together. So it was a way to advance my knowledge and my career at the same time. I'm going to tell a little story, and my beautiful mother and father are here, and I'll be interesting. I'm going to get in trouble when I get off of this stage, I think, but I want to find out if she remembers this story the same way that I do. So I'm a sophomore in college, and I see a flyer up at my school, Navy Nuclear Power, be a new POC officer. I'm like, well, so I call the recruiter and find out what it is, and I learned it's a very involved, intense process to qualify in nuclear power. It was actually almost a year-long process. But the final step to getting accepted in the officer nuclear power program is they fly you to D.C., to Naval Reactors headquarters, and you sit in a room with just one of the pointy heads that knows everything, and they grill you. They quiz you on mathematics, physics, engineering, and you go through a series of those, and then you take a written test, and then you interview with the admiral one-on-one, and then he decides whether or not you get into his program. So I do this, I get accepted. You find out right, like 1 minute after you talk to the admiral, you find out whether or not you're in the Navy in the nuclear power program. I get back to the hotel, and my first phone call was to my mother, and I told her I got accepted, and she started crying, and she told me I wasn't allowed. And I said, Mom, I'm 20, you don't really get a vote, but I appreciate the sentiment. My second phone call was to my then girlfriend, who broke up with me because she didn't want to be a military wife. So this year-long goal of mine that I had finally accomplished, I made my mom cry, and my girlfriend broke up with me. But I tell that story, kind of funny, but what I want you to take away from that is it's not just the veterans, right? We need to thank our veterans, but every veteran has a spouse or a family. The military is a family affair. So as we remember our veterans, please also remember their family members. Again, welcome to Northwest State, and I hope you enjoy the ceremony.
All right, thank you, Todd. And again, to honor you and your service, we would like to present each of our veterans here today with a commemorative Veterans Magnet. You should have received a packet when you checked in, but if you didn't, please make sure you stop by the check-in table before you leave today. So thank you very much. So if you'll take a look to my right, mostly your left, I'd like you to look at the Chair of Honor. And this Chair of Honor is a simple yet extremely powerful reminder of those who served in the military but have not yet returned home, totaling more than 82,000 U.S. service personnel since World War II. The empty chair will serve as an instant reminder of all the sacrifices made by our country by those who are still missing. If you'd also take a look at the insert in your program, we have our POW MIA table setting. This small table is set for one, representing the frailty of one prisoner alone against his or her suppressors. The table is round, showing our everlasting concern for our POW and MIAs. The cloth is white, symbolizing the purity of their intentions to respond with their country's call to arms. The single red rose signifying the blood they may have shed in sacrifice to ensure the freedom of our beloved United States of America. This rose, reminding us of the family and friends of our missing comrades who keep the faith while awaiting their return. The yellow ribbon stands for the yellow ribbons worn on the lapels of the thousands who demand with unyielding determination a proper accounting of our comrades who are not among us tonight. A slice of lemon reminding us of the bitter fate of those missing, captured and held as prisoners in foreign lands. A pinch of salt denoting the tears of our missing and their families who long for answers after decades of uncertainty. The Holy Bible represents the strength gained through faith in our country, founded as one nation under God to sustain those lost from our midst. The lighted candle reflects the light of hope, which lives in our hearts to illuminate their way home, away from their captors, to the open arms of a grateful nation. The glass is inverted, symbolizing their inability to share the evening's toast. Let us remember and never forget their sacrifices. May God forever watch over them and protect them and their families. With our lunch prayer, I'd like to introduce John Wilson. John spent 6 years in the National Guard, rising to first lieutenant from 1957 to 1963. He has served in various capacities at Northwest State Community College throughout the last 50 years, and now serves on the Northwest State Community College Foundation Board. Please help me welcome John Wilson.
I appreciated that Mike went through the insert and given us a little bit of insights. The one thing that I note there is why I'm going to pray is the Holy Bible, and it sustained those who were lost among our midst. Let us pray. Father, you are the sustainer of all things. I thank you for those who have served and given their most, their lives. Bless their families abundantly. And then for those that are here that have served, Father, we ask your blessing on them and their families, that they would sustain and uphold what our country is all about. There's much trial and tribulation around the world, but these are men and women who in some time past have strived to uphold our principles. And for that, Lord, we are grateful. Now you be with us, watch over us, guard us, guide us, and help that we'd be a blessing right where we're at. The results are yours, and we'll give you the praise for it in Christ's name. Amen.
So almost immediately after high school, old Uncle Sam came knocking at Mr. Steve Wing's door. There seemed to be some trouble somewhere in Southeast Asia, and they needed his help. So being a true red-blooded American, and after missing the bus to Canada, Steve entered the U.S. Air Force for 4 years. He was trained as a flight engineer on CH-3 and H-43 helicopters and flew air rescue in South Carolina and Korea before being Special Operations Squadron with CIA, mostly in Laos. Sergeant Wing flew over 130 combat missions before returning home in 1970. In September of 1970, he entered Aviation Tech School in Tulsa, Oklahoma, where he received his FAA license and a certification in radiography and non-destructive testing. While on Christmas break from school, Steve met a gal from McClure, Patty, who became his wife in 1971. After graduation in 1972, he found a radiography opening with Nuclear Energy Services in Columbus, Ohio, where they lived for the next 4 years. In 1976, Steve had the opportunity to return home to Henry County and take over farming operation for his father-in-law, and also started a little sideline trucking operation. That's where they remain today, near West Hope, with 2 great kids, Carla and Ryan, and 4 grandchildren. And speaking of grandchildren, please welcome 2 of his granddaughters, Kenzie and Riley Wing, to the stage as they help to introduce our veteran speaker, Staff Sergeant Steve Wing. Thank you. Just talk right into the mic.
Good afternoon. My name is Riley Wing, and I'm going to be reading my grandpa's first Distinguished Flying Cross. Staff Sergeant Stephen P. Wing distinguished himself by extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight as a CH-3E helicopter flight engineer in Southeast Asia on March 25, 1969. On that date, Sergeant Wing was flying on the lead helicopter of a large multi-aircraft task force, whose highly sensitive mission was to implant and later retrieve a combat assault force deep in the hostile territory. When his aircraft approached the landing area to exfiltrate the friendly forces, it was violently hit by an automatic weapons fire, which severely wounded the aircraft commander and temporarily caused the helicopter to vibrate violently. Sergeant Wing, without regard for his own safety, stood in the open door of the helicopter, returning the ground fire, administering first aid to the wounded crew member, and kept the pilot advised of the extent of the battle damage sustained. The professional competence, aerial skill, and devotion to duty displayed by Sergeant Wing reflect great credit upon himself and the United States Air Force.
Good afternoon. My name is Kenzie Wing, a freshman from Patrick Henry High School, and today I would like to be reading the second Distinguished Flying Cross. Staff Sergeant Stephen P. Wing distinguished himself by extraordinary achievement while participating in aerial flight as a CH-3E helicopter flight engineer in Southeast Asia on the 10th of December, 1969. On that date, Sergeant Wing was flying on a highly sensitive counterinsurgency mission deep in the hostile territory, controlled by the opposing armed forces for over 6 years, attempting to infiltrate an indigenous recovery team into the rice paddy to retrieve a body of an American pilot who had been shot down in the area. When ambushed by over 50 hostile troops firing automatic weapons at his hovering helicopter, Sergeant Wing, armed with a rifle, bravely exposed himself in the open cabin window, continually returned fire, and helped his crew escape the besieged area without receiving damage to helicopter or personnel on board. The professional competence, aerial skill, and devotion to duty displayed by Sergeant Stephen Wing reflect great credit upon himself and the United States Air Force. And now I'd like to be introducing my grandpa, Stephen P. Wing.
Good afternoon. Normally when I've done these speeches before, it's the first thing in the morning, and by now I'm taking a nap. So please bear with me. I've been asked to do these speeches probably 13, 14 years, and I've neglected one thing. So this is the first time I'm going to do this. Over the years, especially as we get older, we take things for granted, we take people for granted. And what I'm trying to say is there's a young lady here I want to acknowledge. Without her love and support, I have no idea where I'd be in my life. So Patty, my lovely wife, you want to stand up? Go ahead and stand up. Oh, she's short. So, by the way, she knows she's short. By the way, we've been married 18 wonderful years, 52 years altogether, but 18 wonderful years. She's heard that before. Like I said, this is the first time I did that, and probably the way she looks, it'll be the last time. Okay, I'm going to throw some numbers at you. The Vietnam War lasted 10 years, and in that time period, 58,318 were killed. There's still 1,604 missing in action. In that time period, over 3 million men and women served our country, and I'm here today to tell you my experience as serving my great country. After high school, I really didn't have any plans. Get a job, buy a car, have some fun. Uncle Sam had a different idea. It was called the draft. So I remembered something. My oldest brother, Ray, was in the Coast Guard, and he did a lot of traveling all over the world, and he said, Steve, if you ever had to go into service, join the Air Force. They're a bunch of uniformed civilians. So I thought, how much trouble could I get in being a uniformed civilian? So I headed over here to Defiance, the Air Force recruiter, and enlisted for 4 years. Shortly after that, headed for Cleveland for a physical. Back then, everybody went to Cleveland for physicals, and it seemed like everybody passed. Then on March 10th, 1966, headed to Texas for basic training. While there, excuse me, you did take like an aptitude test, and mine was mechanical field, and next course open was helicopters. So on completion of basic training, headed to Shepherd Air Force Base, Texas, for basic helicopter school. There, trained for 3 or 4 months. Then I got my first orders. My first orders was an air rescue detachment in Myrtle Beach Air Force Base, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Now, I'm going to remind you, this is 1966. I'm 18 years old. I'm from Newber. I've heard of South Carolina, but not Myrtle Beach. But I tell you what, it was a heck of a place then. So I'm there. We had 2 HH-43 helicopters, air rescue. We supported the F-100s on base. I worked on the flight line for several months, getting the hang of everything, and then an air crew member opened up. So I volunteered, qualified. Now I'm on flying status, making extra money a month flying. Oh, by the way, there's a 9-hole golf course on base, and my first sergeant was a heck of a golfer. So life is good. Then in January of '68, it all went to heck. It was called the Tet Offense, which escalated the Vietnam War. Our F-100s went to Vietnam, and they told us to pack up our choppers because we're going to be receiving orders. So we tore down our helicopters, got our gear together, and about 2 days later, in the middle of the night, 2 C-141 cargo planes pulled up. We loaded up everything, and we got our orders. We were headed for South Korea. See, at that same time period, the Pueblo, which was a CIA spy ship, was captured by the North Koreans. And so that sort of escalated that mess there. So we boarded the C-141, and we flew. Our first stop was Travis Air Force Base, California. Second stop was Wake Island, out in the middle of the Pacific, and had breakfast, refueled. Last stop was Osan, South Korea. Now, this is January of '68, and it's winter. And winters in Korea, similar to ours, a lot different than South Carolina. So we put our choppers together and head for a little base called Kunsan. And there was no room on base for us. So there was a abandoned taxiway where we put our choppers and we did our operations. They had tents. They put up like 4 tents for us. And everybody's seen the TV show MASH. Well, that's what those kind of tents were. Had a plywood floor, and that was it. Our operations, our quarters, sleeping quarters, everything was out of those tents. So I had the experience of, we supported, like, say, the fighters on base, so I got to fly all over South Korea for different missions. Really, how should I say, enjoyed it, but it was a heck of an experience. Then in April of 1968, I received my orders for Southeast Asia. So I packed up my gear, headed back to Myrtle Beach, got my personnel gear, and my first school was CH-3 school back at Shepherd Air Force Base. This is a Sikorsky helicopter, which I'll be flying on. Spent 3 or 4 months there, qualified. Then they sent me to Fairchild Air Force Base in Washington State for survival training. And that was very, very intense. Did some parachute training there, qualified there, headed home for a little leave, then headed for across the Pacific, but my first stop was the Philippines. The Philippines for jungle survival. The Air Force is very good about training people, because if something happens, they say, hey, not our fault, we trained these guys. So anyway, spent about 2 weeks there, jungle survival, spent a couple nights in the jungle, learned to evade and escape. And I remember our instructor one night, and he pointed a certain direction. He goes, an hour flight from here is the war. He said, in my course, my classes, I found out a couple months ago I lost a couple pilots. They were shot down in Vietnam. And he was the trainer, instructor, and boy, did that get our attention. So we listened up the rest of the way. So I finished the training there. Next stop was Tan Son Nhut Air Force Base. And I'll never forget getting off that plane in Tan Son Nhut. The heat, the humidity, the sounds, the smells. It's a reality check. This is the 6 o'clock news. This is where the bodies are coming from. So I spent a couple days there, went to Nha Trang, then I got my permanent orders, and Udon, Thailand Air Force Base, Thailand, home of the 20th Special Operations Squadron called the Pony Express. Very unique outfit. We were classified. We worked mostly with the CIA. We had 10 or 12 choppers, and each chopper had 2 crew chiefs. And our responsibility with those choppers was to keep them airworthy. We did maintenance, serviced them, repairs, flew on them. We almost lived on them. We took a lot of pride in those birds. We even named them. And, of course, our lives pretty much depended on it. We flew all over Southeast Asia. Thailand, North Vietnam, South Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. I even had a mission in Burma. Like I say, we were classified. No one, our choppers, as you see back at the table, they, at the early part of the war, they didn't have numbers or anything on them. Because if we got shot down, we weren't supposed to be there, so they just rid us off, I guess. So we work mostly with the CIA. Reason is, Laos and Cambodia back then were neutral countries, and the Ho Chi Minh Trail came down through China, North Vietnam, into Laos and Cambodia, into South Vietnam to support the North Vietnamese. So one of our missions where we would take these CIA-trained mercenaries and we drop them along the Ho Chi Minh Trail. They would observe troop traffic, troops, whatever. We'd pick them up in a few days, and they would debrief. And of course, a lot of times those missions didn't go that easy. And then another mission of ours was the TACAN sites. TACAN was a radar navigation systems. They used to put them up high in the cliffs in Laos. And we'd go in, drop a team off, they clear out an LZ, a landing zone. Then we'd take in the generators, the personnel, keep them occupied. Sometimes they would get overrun too. We hauled everything. I mean, we did rescue, we had VIPs. I even was on the chopper. We called the Secretary of the Air Force, he even came and did a little observation. Like I said, we just hauled everything. Later in my tour, I spent a year and a half over there, extended. I was stationed temporary duty on a base up north, and they found enemy tunnels on base. And so our mission that night was fly, observation, just to check things out. And we picked up 2 air policemen with night vision goggles. So what we call is a piece of cake, might even get a nap in. So we got airborne, flying circles, about 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, and about a half hour we were airborne. We heard a Mayday. Mayday was aircraft in distress. And they were bombing up north on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and when the aircraft got flak damage, and he didn't know if he could make it back or not. So we were airborne, and I was lucky that night. I had 2 very experienced pilots, and I was first in air rescue also. So I checked out the bird, checked out the hoist, the penetrator. I told the pilots, hey, we got everything we need. They contacted command, told them we were in the area if they need assistance. Well, the pilot, he couldn't make it back. He had to bail out. And so they called us and wanted to know if we could go get him. Now, I want to remind you, this is 1969, and the technology back then for night vision, for flying like that, it wasn't there. There was hardly any rescue. I didn't know of any other night rescues. So anyway, they contact the pilot, make sure it's him, it's not a trap. He sounds like he's okay. And when they were bombing up north, they used these flare ships. They had like little parachutes with these flares, and it just illuminated the whole night. It was brighter than day. So we found the pilot, and see, these are big helicopters. The pilot just can't look out and see everything. So part of our duties too, I was in the door, and you're on hot mic, and I tell the pilot left, right, forward, aft, get him over the down pilot. I'm low in the penetrator. You tell him everything, what's going on. The pilot, young lieutenant, gets on. And I bring him in the door, and he gives me the biggest smile. Then he gives me the biggest hug. No, I haven't had a hug like that since my honeymoon. She's still smiling. Anyway, we get back to the base, and he gets off. His fellow pilots are meeting him, and then they come over and thank us. And it just made you a great feeling that I was part of a crew that probably saved a life that night, because if he spent the night in the jungle, who knows what might have happened. Okay, this is March of 1970. My tour's up. I'm finished. So I get on a bird in Bangkok, and it's full of these chartered flights. You can sit in the back and you see the pilot. There's no frills whatsoever. And it's full of GIs, all branches of the service. And most of us are going home. We're done. Tour's over. And it's a long flight, make a couple stops. Then on the final approach into San Francisco, Travis, it's quiet on the plane. No one's talking. They look out the window and just stare. And as soon as we touch down, spontaneously, everybody starts cheering, crying. We're home. We survived. If some of you guys have done it, it's something you'll never forget. Over the years, our outfit, we were, like I said, pretty unique. We kept close, officers enlisted. And we've having reunions. We've been all over the place. Each guy would sponsor one, and Wyoming, Montana, New Mexico, Florida, South Carolina. It's great. It's great to see everyone, meet their families, see what they've done with their lives. The war stories get better every year. But the first reunion I attended was in Dayton, probably 15 years ago. The reason we had it in Dayton is the Air Force Museum is there. And there's a black CH-3 helicopter called the Black Mariah, tail number 676. It's the actual helicopter I crew chiefed on. I flew most of my missions on. It's in my backyard. Unbelievable. Now, other guys flew on it too, but when I was over there, that was my chopper, I crew chiefed on. And by the way, Saturday, this coming Saturday, Veterans Day, the Air Force Museum has what they call Plane Talk. It's an event where they invite crews like myself who flew on particular aircraft, World War II, Korea, whatever. And I think there's going to be 15 aircraft this year. What they do, they set up tables for us. And as a good friend of mine, we flew together. He lives in Xenia, Marty. And we've done this before, but they'll set us down, and people come up and talk to us and ask us questions, and it's so interesting. And if you've never been to the Air Force Museum, free admittance, open every day except Christmas. It's a fantastic place. If you're interested in history of aviation, it'll knock your socks off if you've never been there before. But I'll be there Saturday, and if anyone comes, I'll have a little present for you. While we were at the first reunion, one of the guys found a letter on the internet, and it was about one of our fellow crew members. And it's very, very inspiring, and I'd like to share it with you now. It's called Turning a Corner, a tribute to Jack Davis by Dwayne Branyon. Today I'm going to share with you a story about something happened to me 15 years ago on Memorial Day. This is something that is very important to me because it changed the way I was thinking at the time and redirected me back on the path that I think Christ wants me to walk, and it showed me what a caring and loving God we have. 15 years ago, I was in the middle of a midlife crisis. I had been feeling burned out for a couple of years. I had been working as hard as I could for 22 years and felt overworked, overstressed, underappreciated, and to summarize, I was doing a great job of feeling sorry for myself. A few days before the approaching 3-day weekend, I came up with an idea that on Sunday, and I really didn't know if it was Memorial Day or Labor Day, it would be nice to take my wife and 4 kids out to dinner after church. I felt that it would be a special occasion, that we'd be all dressed up and we could all go out for a special dinner together. So after Sunday after church, I persisted. They relented, but we jumped into the Suburban and headed to San Diego. I decided a classic Mexican restaurant in Old Town, a place we could go. The decision was out of the blue. As we neared the restaurant, I could see there was no parking spots. So I left my family out on the corner. My wife would put the name in. I drove around looking for a parking spot. It was really crowded. I searched for 10 minutes for a parking spot, driving up and down the streets. I finally found one several blocks from the restaurant. As I got out of the car, got my bearings, I decided on the direction to the restaurant and headed off a fast pace because I was concerned I was holding up dinner. But it was a beautiful day. From the top of the hill where I was parked, you could see the ocean, beautiful homes, landscaping, trees along the way. I really enjoyed my fast-paced walk. As I was walking, I realized, looking ahead down the blocks down the hill, there on the street corner, it seemed something very interesting to me. I thought it might be one of those Indian bands with guitars, flute, drums, neat store or something, but I knew there was something on that street I wanted to see. I suddenly woke up from my daydreaming and realized I missed the street I was supposed to turn on and actually walked a block too far. As I walked at a fast pace, I saw what I thought was a crazy homeless man yelling on a street corner. Oh well, I thought. I walked very fast right past him. I got about 40 feet from him, and I discerned he was not a homeless person, but a Vietnam veteran with a gray beard, dressed in combat fatigues, was making some kind of speech. 20 feet further, I could see this was not a street corner, but one with a small memorial statue, a plaque, and I can see he was calling out names. I heard him say 2 names as I approached, and I noticed people were standing and sitting there hearing the names of San Diego men who were killed in the Vietnam War. There was no place to walk behind him. The path was blocked by people sitting on the ground. I did not have time to stop and listen to him. I was hungry and late for lunch. I would have to walk very fast, right in front of him. The moment my ear passed directly in front of him, 12 inches from his mouth, my shoulder almost brushing the speaker's chest, the man proudly proclaimed the name Jack Davis. What? I was stunned. I almost fell to my knees. The name Jack Davis would not mean much to most of you, but he was a good friend of mine in high school. He was killed in Vietnam when his helicopter machine gunner was shot down. He was a nice, quiet, humble, shy, innocent kid. We had played football together for a couple of years in the agricultural class. Jack was one of the most unassuming, quiet, nice guys you'd ever know. He was also one of those people with a big smile ready for you if you did something in the background to soak up the experience of life, and is first to pat you on the back if you did something good. The moment I heard Jack's name in my ear, an explosion of thoughts and emotions shot through my body. My thought was, wow, what just happened? Immediately, I tried to understand why I was on that street corner. That instant, my ear directly in front of the speaker's mouth as my old friend's name was called out. I asked God why, but I knew. I felt God's presence. There was no doubt in my mind the odds of me being there without my knowledge of the transpiring events. The instant my friend's name was called out, 12 inches from my ear, was 1,000,000,000 to 1. This was not a mere chance. I felt as though I had a glass of cold water thrown in my face. My body went numb. God was kindly telling me to wake up and grow up. Here I am, feeling sorry for myself because I was working too hard, when my friend Jack gave the biggest sacrifice anyone could give. He gave his life for his country. The emotions I felt was twofold. One, a total awe of God's loving and caring for me. The ability to control my thoughts and actions, to actually get me to that street corner at that instant. Second emotion I felt was shame. I was ashamed of myself for being filled with self-pity. My friend Jack never had a chance to have a family of his own, to hold his kids on his lap, to feel hugs and love returned to him. He bravely fought a war for his country and gave his life where others could be free. Again, I knew God was telling me something. I need to shape up, grow up, need to change the way I thought and acted. From that moment on, I changed. I found that if you have faith and trust in God, He will always take you to where you need to be now and in your life to come. For me, it was that street corner in Old Town, Dwayne Branyan. Jack Davis was also a friend of mine. We flew together, we partied together. He was a heck of a guy. On that fateful morning, I wasn't scheduled to fly, but for some reason I went down the flight line. Jack was there pre-flying the bird for a mission. So I helped him. We got talking about a party. He had 1 week left to go into service. His tour of duty was up. His 4 years were up. He was gone home. But instead, he died on a mountain in northern Laos, January 17th, 1969. He was 22 years old. And so to you, men and women who have served and sacrificed, thank you, God bless you, and God bless America.